Welcome to the Midnight Bible Study. I want to talk tonight about an amazing miracle, a prayer, faith, healing story that is incredible, and also how this is relevant to you and I, because it's very relevant, and this story tells us a lot about how faith healing is within our reach, but it's not necessarily the way we always thought it was. That's how I would see this. I want to tell you, by the way, I'm telling you a story that comes from Francis McNutt in his book, The Power to Heal. And McNutt writes, he tells his story about this woman, a young woman who was at a retreat that this McNutt and his healing, his prayer, he had a prayer ministry, a prayer healing ministry. And he's telling this story. They were giving a retreat in Colombia, South America, and he heard he heard about a young girl who they were praying for her, and she had a short leg by 6 inches due to a childhood injury where she stepped on a sharp object in a swamp, and her leg got infected, and that affected her development and growth thereafter. And through osteomyelitis, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But at any rate, her leg was not only too short by 6 inches, but it was warped and twisted. Her foot was undersized and warped, and she was, in desperate need of a miracle, to put it mildly. And so he heard that he was told by someone else that this girl over here, they'd been praying for her, and her leg had grown an inch or more, during this prayer service. So that's like, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is, but this had happened right there while they're praying for her. And then McNutt comes over, and he says, as we prayed gently for 2 hours, the leg seemed to grow another inch. So there's 2 key points here. One, they prayed for 2 more hours. Now, this is obviously deep soaking prayer. As one way McNutt describes this kind of prayer, it's like X-ray. If you have an X-ray, that you have these rays coming through you, and the longer you have this, so these prayers having this like X-ray like effect upon you, the more dramatic the effect is going to be. Except, unlike an X-ray, this is going to be, God's loving, healing power. And so but the other part is they prayed for 2 hours, which is, if you're sitting there praying for someone for 2 hours, that's hard. That's not frivolous, or, it takes a sacrifice for somebody to sit there and pray for 2 hours for someone else. But on the other hand, it's done with love and service. And what was it worth to this girl? Well, the leg had grown an inch more. So this was, a miracle. It took somebody had to stop and devote some time. So he said, I joined them in their prayer. I'm talking to the 19-year-old woman, Teresa. I found she had stopped. He tells a story about how she was wounded. And then he says, as he prayed for 2 more hours, the prayer grew another inch. And he says, we took a break for supper and came back to pray. So for another hour after supper. So they prayed 2 hours. A miracle, the leg grows another inch. They're exhausted. They go have dinner. They come back and they pray after dinner for 2 more hours. And again, he writes, it seemed that her leg grew still another inch. Also, the twisted leg was gradually straightening. This is all happening right before their eyes. You couldn't see it happen, he writes, because it was so gradual, but by comparing the length every 10 minutes or so, we could see the comparative change taking place. So this is exhausting. He's already got 4 hours into it, plus they'd already been praying for her prior to that. And then it's getting late, so, they call it a day. He writes, the next day they gathered at a home in Medellin. The bishop was there and prayed for 2 more hours in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So 4 more hours of prayer the next day at 2 different times, 2 hours and 2 hours. He writes, this day the lake seemed to grow another inch. It had already grown 3 inches the day before. So these are huge. Look, let's just call it what it is. It's a miracle. But it wasn't a cheap miracle. Someone had to, actually it was. You say, I had to pray for 6 hours. But this is life-changing for this girl. That's actually not a big price to pray to create a life-changing miracle for this young woman. But on the other hand, who's going to pray for who is going to sit for 2 hours at a time praying for someone? There are people who will do it, and it's something worth considering, because I think we all know somebody who could use that prayer, that kind of prayer soaking, and that kind of friendship and devotion. So he says we gathered the next day, prayed for 2 more hours in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. So that's another 4 hours the next day. Prayer of this, he writes, the prayer of this time, it takes a lot out of you. So this is exhausting to sit to pray in this way. He writes, I don't know exactly how what words he said, how he prayed. But anyway, he called it exhausting. This day the leg seemed to grow another inch. It had grown about 3 inches. All right. The right foot, which was flat, had no arch to speak of, grew and changed shape until the arch came to normal. So it had this flat foot, and suddenly it grew to a normal arch as they prayed that day. In a period of hours, her toes on the right foot had nearly doubled in size. That's because they were undersized. So now they're getting closer to normal. Doubled in size. This is in one day. So several other things happened. After the first cessation, we discovered that Teresa needed to forgive her mother for what had happened. So this girl had in her youth. She, when she was injured, she had her mother had to give her up because she couldn't afford to pay for her to get her proper medical treatment, and so she had to board her with other people who could afford to get her the proper medical treatment. And so, however, to a kid, she felt like she had been abandoned. So this prayer group said, look, you've got to forgive your mother. So Teresa went along with that. She had always felt, some grudge against her mother and some felt sense of abandonment, but she agreed. And then it says, after that, Teresa's leg again started straightening and growing as they continued to pray. And so, as that day of prayer ended, then they also noticed that the scar on her leg was getting better. And then this is incredible. Okay, this is the second day. They've probably got 16, is it 8 to 12 hours of prayer, something like that. Anyway, it's not a formula. It's going to be different for every person, but they've put a lot of time into it. And imagine the love of this group of people who is devoting hours and hours of time for this one girl. Imagine if that was you or I, how we would feel, the love we would feel, the appreciation and the thanksgiving we would feel that people would devote this much time to pray for us and to see the miracles taking place. It's a great gift. It's hard to imagine a gift like that. So, but as that day of prayer ended, okay. Since then, her leg had continued to grow until there's only half an inch of difference. Half an inch. So it was it 5 inches? I think when we started off talking about this, it was 5 inches or 6 inches short. I've lost track here. I believe it was 5 inches when we started. So now it's only a half inch. The second day, 5 inches short. Now it's only a half an inch, right? So, thank you for the prayers. And now, she can touch the ground. Her short leg can now touch the ground, which it hasn't ever been able to do before. Okay. Now, it says we prayed about 2 more hours. And now they asked her to. The bishop asked her to stretch her leg and foot, an act which had always caused her intense pain. Okay, and hesitantly she stretched out her leg, and as she did so, the bone stayed in place for the first time in years. So there's the bone which was broken is now staying in place for the first time in years. Okay, and then. McNutt says, but most of the healing, which required that her leg, foot, and grow to straighten to be mended, when the doctors had given up hope of any further improving taking place and now taking place. So all of the doctors had already given up on this girl, and they said, look, there's nothing more we can do. And sometimes that's exactly the most important time for prayer, because at that point, that may be your only hope, and it may be your best hope, but sometimes, it's possible that maybe people are more likely to pray for you at a time like that when that's your last hope. I don't know. It depends. Everything is an individual situation. But maybe there are some things, of course, where doctors play a crucial part. And so, but if the doctors fail or give up, then at that point, certainly prayer is essential. So, but the key point here is friends had been willing to spend hours gathered around Teresa in prayer. I mean, not everybody has friends like that or has someone who would do that. But that reminds me of the story of the evangelist, and I've forgotten his name at the moment. I've got his book around here somewhere, but when he was a kid, he was confined to he was basically left in his bed, expected to die of a disease, and he began reading the Bible himself. No one was praying for him, but he began focusing on the Word of God himself, speaking the Word. He was speaking the Scriptures and obsessed over the Scriptures, and he was reading the Bible so much that relatives said, "Look, you've got to stop this. You're going to go crazy." But he didn't listen to him. He just kept reading the Word, filling his mind with the Word, speaking the Scriptures, speaking the Word, Scriptures of healing, speaking the words of faith. This went on for about a year. And then he found himself healed. So there's different ways. Now it took him, maybe it took him a year. It took this girl 48 hours with all these people praying for her. So, but you do what you can. Healing from God. Now, that also may have been his formation to go on to be a famous Protestant pastor in the healing ministry. So, finally, let me wrap up by saying, even Jesus said it's hard work. He said, he referred to his healings as works. The works that I do in my Father's name are my witness. John 10:25. So, and then the last thing McNutt says on this topic, on this chapter, is he's talking about, he sees homeless cripples and he wonders, he used to wonder if prayer would heal these people. But now after, his experience, these kind of experiences that he went through, he came to realize that the real question is, will anybody pray for them? So there you go. Thanks for watching, And good night. God bless from the Midnight Bible Study.